sea of red, it's time for another Fireside Chat, the official podcast of Flames fans. It's go time.
Well, we're back for another week of Calgary Flames hockey, another fairly successful week. And this week, joining us on the podcast is our old friend Kevin Olenick from the Shifts and Pucks podcast. How you doing, Kevin?
Good. I wouldn't call myself old, though. Maybe others would, but I don't feel old. Is that okay?
If you know, I sort of thought about it this way. When I turned 30, I thought to myself, wow, in NHL terms, I'm now on the end of my, the back half of my career.
Yeah. Well, I've seen people say that 28-year-old Andrei Kuzmenko is an aging winger. So those are the kind of things that make you feel a little old, Dan.
As I'm now a 38-year-old with a mortgage that'll probably keep me working until I'm in my 50s, I'm like, you know what? I'd probably be in my last couple NHL seasons here. So
yeah, you're old enough to be a coach almost.
That's right. I could retire my own banner in my own house.
Yeah.
And Matt, how are you doing?
Fairly good. It was an exciting week of Flames hockey and lots to be excited about.
Let's jump into it, shall we, gents?
Yes.
Calgary went on the road to start the week. Calgary Flames played the LA Kings, the LA Kings came to Calgary to play. This was an interesting game here. The Calgary Flames ended up winning 3-1 in this one against the Kings. Wolf made 28 saves, and the Flames held off a late push. We saw the Kings start to kind of get that push going at the end, and they were able to keep it at bay. Backlund and Huberdeau score 36 seconds apart in the second period for the Flames. Matt, what'd you think of this one?
This was the Dustin Wolf show for most of this contest, and I thought that the Flames as a whole, with LA being one of the better teams in the NHL and consistently frustrating to play against, I felt that the whole team handled them really well. And the handful of chances that the Kings did get, Wolf was there to make a good save and almost got a shutout.
This was one of those games that was 0-0 for a lot of it, but was not boring.
No, and the two quick goals, it's one of those where this team, whether they're giving up or scoring two goals, it tends to turn the game the other way, and they were able to keep the Kings at bay for most of the rest of the game, other than the late goal by Moore.
Kevin, did you watch the Amazon Prime presentation?
Yeah, I did. In terms of the game, I thought it was one of their better, most consistent efforts of the year. Pretty complete all the way around. Yeah, I mean, the Kings did push, especially in the second half of that third period, but you expect that. They get the quick goals. I thought the Flame, I think one thing that is just been sort of impressive and not necessarily talked about with the Flames is there is some speed in this lineup. Wouldn't say they're the fastest team in the league, but they certainly in the Prime broadcast certainly brought it up that there was a lot of speed they noted in that game. So I thought that was the best effort for the Flames, so the most consistent effort from 1, 2, 3 throughout the year for a win. I mean, I think the other one that you could argue was close was probably that game against Winnipeg where they had the tough loss. But I thought a really good effort.
Yeah, I agree with both of you guys. I think it was a great game for the Flames. I think it was a good, complete game. That goal that got called back, I mean, if that was a save, that probably would have been the save of the year.
Yes, and it just went over the line. They did have an actual review on angle on NHL.com that showed that it maybe by like a centimeter went over the line, if that, but it
I thought it was funny that they spent more time reviewing that than they did the goal in 04.
True.
Yeah. They're taking, if you want to get Sean on a rant, they are taking, and even all of us on Shifts and Pucks, these reviews are just taking way too long overall, and it is slowing down the game. I mean, there has to be a time limit. If the call on the ice is a goal and you can't find anything conclusive, just call it a goal.
Yeah, realistically, in all of the various angles, they have ones that are clearly better angles generally than others. Like the under the crossbar angle that they had, which showed that it actually was a goal. It should be like those should be the ones that you go to first, and then like, and it should be relatively, you know, unless like there's a guy's butt in the way or something like that, like like those angles should be fairly clear and quick to determine if it's a goal, and like not necessarily needing like 14 angles.
Well, and the situation room in Toronto should be able to see all the angles they've got, I imagine, before, because that wasn't a coach's challenge. That was an official's challenge. So they shouldn't probably be saying, let's look at this if they don't think they've got a clear angle on it.
Yeah. But good on Huska to not challenge that either, not waste everybody's time. And,
at that point of the game, he didn't have to, right?
No, and you don't want to give the Kings a power play too, like, because you fail on that, you give them a power play, and it being a 1-goal game late, you don't want to, poke the bear anymore.
I was at the Saddledome, so I didn't see the Prime presentation. Matt, what'd you think of the way that they did the Prime presentation?
Honestly, that may have been the single Flames best broadcast I've ever watched, because they actually talked about the Calgary Flames. It's hard to, recognize that when you're watching a Flames broadcast that they actually talk about your team and the actual players on your team instead of a certain guy up north that nobody in Calgary gives two fruits about. And yet
Zach Cassian, come on.
Zach Cassian. Oh, Zach Cassian. Right.
Yes.
And whoever the backup is now.
Yeah.
No, I get it, Matt. And I mean, that used to be the case more in the mid 2000s when every team had their own broadcast team, right? And it was very evident. I mean, you could flip from the same game, Calgary and LA, and hear a very different story being told by the TV broadcasters. But now even that, they tend to just talk about one guy. Kevin, what do you think of it?
Well, sorry, also, I just want to throw in, like, especially in the intermissions and the post game thing, like normally, even during like Flames regional broadcasts, like they, start talking about Edmonton or Toronto, which it's like, you're watching a Flames game. Why do we care about, that? Like they had Mike Vernon on. They actually had a post-game show that was about the Flames game, and it's been a very long time since we've seen anything like that.
It's one of the reasons I prefer a lot of times to listen on the radio, because they're very focused on the Flames. Kevin, what do you think of the broadcast?
Yeah, I've been really impressed with what Amazon Prime has done so far with just the fact that they found a way to put themselves in front of the fans, and they found somewhere at the Saddledome to plop that desk was great. I don't know where that was. You probably do, Dan.
It was in the middle of the concourse.
Yeah. I got the fans kind of involved. I think that's a really neat concept. I love the broadcast team of Forsland, Hickey, and Shelley. I think they do just a great job. There's a great chemistry between all three of them. And Adnan Virk is a Canadian institution that is not talked enough. I mean, he's not only done hockey, he's done MLB. He did a brief stint with Raw. He's one of those guys that I think people should, I think more people know about, but this is like, he does such a great job of hosting. And Blake, what's Blair or Blake Bowden, who's just, I believe, a scout for the Kings, does a nice job. I just felt like the look, the camera angles, just the whole feel of it just feels very fresh. And I feel with Matt saying, I think they got a lot of positive comments on social media, and I wonder if the current state of the broadcast, I think a lot of people feel it's a bit stale.
Well, and especially with, like you look at how like Major League Baseball is blowing up, NBA basketball is blowing up. It's because of the fact that like their broadcasts are very tailored, and like giving more insight and more details, and very centric on the actual teams that are playing. And in hockey, it's really not. And it's kind of like you're watching the game to watch the game, and you're not really paying any attention to the production part of it because it's like in the way mostly more so than like contributing to. And like we see like with the NFL, like all of the other sports have it more tailored, with the presentation being like actually important and, adding to the game watching experience. And like Sportsnet, it's very much not that. And like the difference between Prime and Sportsnet is like night and day. And like the Prime broadcast was very much reminiscent of the other three sports.
I had to laugh at this one. Grant Buchanan does the in-arena hosting for this one. Said, as usual, spiel, welcome to Saddle Dome. This game's on Prime. He said, that means your parents are going to call you and try to figure out how to watch it.
Yeah. 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 I understand the joke. I think people are kind of getting used to that now, to all the streaming services. I think more people are starting to cut the cord anyway. I think,
and like in baseball, like they have a bunch of games on Apple TV, for example.
Yeah. I guess the one thing that I think maybe, Matt, let me maybe ask you this. Dan, let me ask you this. I felt that there was a lot of frustration during the Cup run with the Oilers last year because it just felt like the broadcast was so overtly pro-Oiler that it was really hard to watch at times.
I literally was watching either the Florida feed or had the Canadian feed on mute because it was nauseating levels of bias to the point where, like I want to hear a properly called game, especially in the Stanley Cup Finals.
Yeah.
Not pom-pom waving on the sidelines for a team that, you're not necessarily cheering for.
Yeah.
And like I can understand the Canadian broadcast slanting a bit, like 60-40 to the Canadian team, but it should be an unbiased situation.
I think the other thing we're seeing in a lot of these broadcasts, and I mean, we probably don't want to dwell on the broadcasting this whole episode. We got a lot to talk about, but I think we're seeing a lot more where they do the call in your market, and then we send it back to some main group at the intermission for every broadcast at that time. So we're getting this very league centric thing at the intermission, as like Kevin, I think it was Kevin said, here they had Mike Vernon come in and talk and that sort of thing. And I think maybe what we need to do is keep the broadcast in the market, not always go back to Toronto for a big roundtable discussion and then back to Calgary. Maybe they need to start working on that regionally and have that staying within the market.
Yeah, I agree. I don't want to get too much down the weeds, but I do think that there's something, and I don't think it's not only, to be fair, it is not only Sportsnet. I think TSN is doing the same thing, and I think it's both of them. I don't think are servicing their local market as effectively as they should.
Yeah, it's economies of scale.
Yeah.
Well, should we move on to the next game?
Yes.
The next game, Calgary took a quick trip to Vancouver, lost 3-1. Elias Pettersson had a goal and assist for the Canucks in this one. Kevin, why don't we start with you this time? What was your thoughts on this game?
Oh, they looked really tired, which is not surprising. This was essentially, they went on a 5-game road trip.
5 games and 8 nights in 5 different locations.
Yeah, they were just out of gas, and this was a game that the Canucks came off a really tough 7-3 loss to the Oilers. They needed to make a statement here. That was a game that I don't want to be too ridiculous to say that this was a must-win game for the Canucks, but they had to rebound from that game against the Oilers. The Flames just looked out of gas, and
I thought they put on a decent fight for being out of gas.
Yeah,
Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, like it wasn't a complete like blowout or anything like that, or like even like the first period of the first game of the season where the Flames were very out of sorts. Like there was no period of time during this game where like Vancouver was running over the team. It's just that they couldn't quite get anything to quite click enough in the offensive zone to get any offense going. But again, 5 games in 8 days in 5 different cities, it's going to be a little bit tough for you to get your legs going in the right way.
And then they came home. and played against the Nashville Predators. This was a 2-0 Flames win. Miramanov and Coleman score for Calgary. Nashville.
Sorry, I'm being a whistle because it was a theme that you heard throughout the game. I just wanted to reenact some of the game live.
The official stats, there was over 80 whistles in this game. 80 whistles. Like the refs must have had one on every finger. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Nashville's lost 6 of 7 now after this one. We should give credit to Dustin Wolf, his first ever NHL shutout here, and some big roster changes. We saw Pospisil move to the wing and Zari at center. Matt, what do you think of those changes?
I wanted to congratulate Wolf on the shutout, shutting out the team with the cat logo. Makes sense. Wolf, cat, Anyhow,
it would have been nice if he got against his hometown team in San Jose.
True. Pospisil, I think, was a standout in this game because last week we talked about how, like, him being
you
at
thought he was
the
worst Flames forward.
Yeah, like he was holding the team back because of his lack of excellent play at center. They shift him over to the wing, and he was notable basically every time he was out there, creating havoc, taking shots, nearly scored a couple of goals, and was notable in each shift. And I thought that was a marked improvement, and like he was able to actually utilize his skill set, which was grinding out pucks in the corners and hitting guys and that kind of thing. Connor Zary, I thought, played well enough at center, far better than what Pospisil would bring in that same zone, but it's one game, so hopefully he can learn as the games go on.
Kevin, do you have any different thoughts?
I just felt like Pospisil has been thinking the game a lot, playing center, and I think it affected his play when he was bounced back to the wing. And I think if you just keep him at the wing, I think he will be fine. I don't think he's comfortable playing NHL center. I understand that he played there for Slovakia, tried him out there. I understand why they tried to do it, but I think that I almost think that Brad Larson almost admitted just the way that they want the Flames to play center, that's just not going to work for Pospisil. So hopefully this is the end of that. It's on the wing. Connor Zary didn't look at a place. It wasn't perfect. I mean, even Connor Zary wasn't completely satisfied, but I think it was about time to at least give this a try.
And while not perfect, for the available options, probably the best possible option.
Yeah, he pretty much is at this point. I mean,
yeah, it's basically between him and Sharon Govich. Like, there's not really any other realistic option of the top 9 guys.
Yeah, I don't feel that Sharon Govich is a center on any team. I think he's more comfortable on the wing too. He just allows him to shoot the puck a lot more. So I think that I'm open to this Zary conversation center continuing, but it's very, very clear they need at least 2. We'll get into this a little later.
We'll come back to that thought.
Yeah, they need to address the position overall.
They sure do. Matt, anything else about this game you want to talk about?
I do want to point out that Nashville, they're starting to actually resemble an NHL team again. But
weird thing to say when you got Stamkos in your roster.
I know, and the timing though, like you can tell that like they're going to get hot soon. It's just that like the timing of guys like Marchessault, Shea, and Stamkos is not quite there yet. Much like when Dougie Hamilton first came to the Flames, like it took like nearly 2 months for him to get going. It's starting to seem like the Predators are getting on the right page together, and I wouldn't be surprised if like over the next month they go on a big winning streak. It's just that they're not quite there yet. And
a friend of mine said this Predators team is like what you do in your Xbox, where you just go and acquire all the best players, but you don't have to think about chemistry.
Yeah, exactly, and it takes a bit.
Yeah, there feels like a lack of chemistry on this team. So I think they will. They have to get it together fairly quickly. But they've always been a notoriously slow starting team. They always pick it up in the second half of the year.
Well, when you're
But I
doing
just
worse than
feel-
San Jose, that says something.
yeah.
True.
But I mean, the one concern I have is I just think they're in the wrong division to get off to a bad start. Like it is going to be really tough for them to recover to a playoff position.
It is, but I mean, at the same time, if we look, they're only 4 points down on St. Louis, who's tied with Utah, and 1 point down from Colorado. Like Matt said, I think if they can get it going quickly, they can recover. But they can't get too much deeper into this hole.
Yeah, there are a lot of teams in the middle. Like the Flames are basically like I think it's like 5 points out of being like a bottom 3 team. So, even though we're in the top half of the standings, so everything is in such flux. Because like there's other than like New Jersey and Winnipeg, like everybody's basically in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if we take a look at those stats, Calgary now sits in the first wild card position in the Western Conference. In the Pacific Division, they're fourth at 21 points. After 18 games, they're 9-6-3. Tied with Vancouver, who's also 21 points, 9-4-3. Edmonton is starting to creep up on us. They're at 20 points in fifth. And then obviously LA and Vegas above us, 23 for LA and 24 for Vegas. So we're close to the top, but also close to the bottom.
Well,
and I think that's how the Western Conference is going to be this year.
First of all, they're ahead of the Oilers.
Yep.
They have a higher winning percentage than the Oilers. They also have more regulation wins than the Oilers, and their goal difference is also better than the Oilers, -2 to a -7.
I believe what you're trying to say, Kevin, is in your face.
And they also have a better home record than the Oilers.
There you go.
So, in other words, Oilers suck. So
that's correct.
Which I think that's the consensus of everybody. So
I will transcribe that into the show notes once again.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen. Well, let's talk, now that we've talked about the games, let's talk about some of the stories around the team. I think the one to start with is Anthony Mantha will be out for the season. Last Thursday got ACL surgery. This is probably going to put this will probably put Coronado as a regular on this team, but the Flames have been rotating that 13th forward position out. They had Hunt, then they had Klapka. So let's just talk about the Mantha thing first. While, I mean, Mantha wasn't looking great, the Flames, I think, brought this guy in to be able to move him. And now they're missing out on that asset. And I think that's going to be something that the Flames fans are going to feel down the road. Kevin, what do you think?
Yeah, you know what, I would grade his play as inconsistent, but man, the guy does have some legitimate talent when he wants to use it.
Yep.
It is an unfortunate loss just for him, who's trying to restore his career, and for the Flames, who I do think was going to try to trade him at the deadline to get a pick.
You're missing out on that second or third pick.
Yeah, I might suggest that there may be another way to get that, but that's a conversation.
For sure.
Maybe.
Yeah, but I think this guy was brought in simply for the point of trading him, and now that's gone.
Yeah, more or less like they dealt Mangiapane, brought Mantha in to just, utilize, getting a third or a second round pick. That won't obviously happen. And, it is disappointing. And because like Mantha did bring some size and some skill, intermittently throughout the games he played. And the type of injury that he suffered, it's usually a 6-month recovery time, which puts it around May. So, not likely to return during the season. He might be ready as soon as like 4.5 months, but
I think the team has said he's shut down for the season.
Yeah, so it's doubtful that any of that would happen.
And like Kevin, you were saying inconsistent, yes, but at the same time, that's why you're on the deal you're on, right? If you're consistent, you're not here on a 1 year.
No.
Yeah, especially a 6'5", like 230-pound winger, that has some offensive skill. Like if you're consistent, like you're getting like 7-8 million a year, not like a 1 year at 3 million
on a rebuilding team.
Yeah. Now, do you bring him back next year?
Possibly. It depends on the situation. You leave the door open, much like with Shillington after last season. It just depends on how everything else shakes out.
Yeah, I think it would really depend, like Matt said, on who's available in the offseason if you feel you're going to need a winger. I don't think the Flames are going to be needing to bring in a veteran winger in the offseason. So this now puts Matt Coronado in a top 6 spot, which we've talked about for a while that he needed. He needed to be in that top 6. He needed to get off the fourth line. Do either of you guys think that Coronado will not be a full-time Flame this year now?
Barring injury, I think he'll stick. He might regress at some point. Like, he's been good the last, 2 weeks. But, he might fall back a bit at some point if he can't maintain his assertiveness that has been prevalent the last.
But even if he falls back, do you think he falls all the way back to the Wranglers dressing room?
Depends on how hard he struggles.
And if he struggles that much, I think you've really got to question the NHL readiness of this player.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, he's been one of the better forwards the last couple of weeks on the team. And he's certainly been one of the better wingers the last couple of weeks on this team. I feel like he's been better than Sharangovich. He's been better than Kuzmenko. I mean, he's played less games than both of them and has more goals than both of them. The only player that I feel like has been kind of competitive with him in terms of a winger spot is when he's played wing has been Justin Kirkland. So to me, it's not about Coronado taking a step back. I mean, even his step back, it's time for Igor and Kuzmenko to play up a little bit here too. So, I mean, they put him with Backlund and Coleman. That tells me that they have plans to keep him around for a really, really long time because that's your dependable pair, right? Backlund and Coleman. So
yeah, the teachers for insert young player here, whether it's guys like Kachuk, Mangiapane, insert any of the Flames up and coming young guys. You staple them to Backlund and say, okay, learn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I mean they gave him some power play time. I mean, the other question is there anyone on the Wranglers that you feel can come up and take over from Coronado? And I don't see anybody.
No. There's some guys down there that are having a good year, like Kearns, but I don't think Kearns is that guy yet.
Yeah.
I don't think Walker Duehr is that guy.
Yeah, Stromgren might, Peltier might.
Stromgren, I think, is going to be more of a fourth line guy.
Yeah, but, in terms of guys that might get a shot at the NHL, I don't think you see Honzek back for this season.
No,
just to have him establish himself as a pro. But there's nobody imminently deserving a call up right now.
And I think even if there is, we've got to look, and we talk on the show a lot about replacing like with like you said, maybe Stromgren gets a call up. I don't think you put Stromgren on your second line. I think Stromgren becomes a fourth line call up. So is there anyone that would sort of fit into that top 9? I don't see it.
No.
Well, Jacob Pelche has 2 goals this year. And I know that there was a whole bunch of ring and wristing about player development and losing a guy on waivers and all of this with Pelche. The fact of the matter is Daryl Sutter played him more than Ryan Huska when he played up here. As much as Daryl Sutter mishandled that situation, we don't need to relitigate that. But I don't he hasn't proven to be an effective goal scorer, even for a bottom 6 role in the National Hockey League yet. So
that's that guy. What number is he? Number 49? That was Daryl's thing, right?
Yeah. Well, and Peltier, I think he was on the right trajectory to be that high quality third line type forward. And then his shoulder injury last year and then the subsequent shoulder injury has derailed him. And the 2 goals, we were commenting in the preseason that his shooting ability is just gone. And 2 goals in the AHL is quite indicative of that.
Especially on a team like the Wranglers, who are, on fire.
Yeah, and he's on one of the scoring lines, and yet he's only got 2 goals. And it's one of those where sometimes injuries derail what looked like a trajectory towards being a legit NHL player. We'll see if he bounces back at any point, or if this is just the guy he is, in which case he's just organizational depth and kind of irrelevant. Which is disappointing to say.
What do you guys think the Flame? Oh, go ahead, Kevin.
I think the other thing that has to be discussed here, like for me, is you're looking at this Wrangler team that is 12-3 to start. This is a team, like, you're a rebuilding organization. I think getting a good Calder Cup playoff run with a possible ability to get a championship out of this, I think would be great for the organization, and I think would be great for the city as well. And I don't know if you want to bump. I don't know if you want to shake any of that off right now. I would be leaving Coronado up, and I would try to keep this team as close to where they are as possible. And I know that there's probably somebody out there that wants Hunter Bruskevich up. I just think let's leave this team and let them go on try to see what they can do on a playoff run.
I've been the guy for years. I mean, you've both heard me over the years. I'm the guy who says, keep guys in the AHL. We don't need to bring them up just to see them.
Yeah, and you look at like teams that have been successful in the past at developing their own guys, like Detroit in the 2000s. Like they would just let guys overcook, so that way, like when they were ready at like 23, 24, they could just step into whatever role it was and perform. And like you look at a guy like Soloviev, who's having a stellar season in the AHL as well. He's been allowed to get like the occasional cup of coffee, but instead, like, he's getting primetime minutes in the AHL and is showing very well that he might be ready for the step up next season or later this year if we trade off some people and be an actual legitimate top 6 defenseman in this league, which would be good for both him and the organization. And instead of rushing him when like last year he got some opportunities and looked decent, they could have just kept him around and not got guys like Bean and Barry to flesh out their decor, and instead placing that emphasis on player development instead.
It's important.
Yeah. I think that there's been I know social media, can be negative, as you saw, Dan, but I feel like there's been some unfair criticism to the Flames development model that I think that Dustin Wolf is a perfect example of what the Flames are doing is on the right track. Look what he's doing. They were patient with him. He's developed. I mean, even Marty Prospus, O'Connor, they do know what they're doing.
I was about to say, Pospisil and Zari are great examples of that, right? Guys that are low round draft picks and have made the NHL and made an impact in the National Hockey League. And, that's not something you see every day. I mean, the Flames, that's been one of their, I guess, the talks for about 10 years now, is they're able to find gold in mid rounds, and not just find gold, but I think a lot of it comes from developing that after the player is drafted.
Yeah.
Well, and using Wolf as an example, like after his first stellar season in the AHL, like there are a number of teams that would have called him up to be the backup, sort of like what Nashville did with Askarov. And, Askarov has kind of stumbled since then, even though like his first season in the AHL, he was really strong. And, they let Wolf more time. They called him up for brief stints just to like, hey, this is what the NHL's like. But then reassigned him back to the farm team. And, now easing him in, not giving him starter minutes. And, he's been one of the best goalies in the NHL this year.
And I do think, gentlemen, that a lot of this comes from having the team here. Right. I think they can see these guys and they're more familiar with them. The coaches share an office. I think if this team was still in Stockton, California, you might see guys being brought in for a look a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, we're not an AHL show, but I would not be surprised if Edmonton tries to move their team up here too. Vancouver's done it. Calgary's done it. I think there's a huge benefit
isn't
there.
Edmonton already got an AHL team? Oh, wait.
They got 2 of them. It's like when you see Canada field 2 teams in a tournament, a red and a blue. They're fielding blue and also blue.
Yeah.
And Kevin, what you were saying about, not bringing a guy up there, I think that begs the question of the Flames need extra body on forward. We saw them bring Hunt up and then send him down. We saw them bring Klapka up and send them down. Do you guys think they're just going to play hokey pokey with the 13th forward all year, bring one guy in, bring one guy out, bring one guy up and shake his stick all about? Or do you think they're going to, just kind of pull up whoever they don't need for the Wranglers? Or does somebody emerge as number 13? Matt, what do you think?
I think that there's no real onus unless the guy is like looking like he needs to sit for whatever reason. There's not really a need for a 13th forward, but I do understand like if you're going on a road trip that you call somebody up for that road trip. But if you're in Calgary, it's like, oh, we need a body. Okay, well, go to the other side of the hall and grab somebody out of the room. Like it's no big deal.
What do you think, Kevin?
I think that if there's someone that they can pluck off waivers to fill that 13th spot, I think that they're going to do it. Like if there's like a bottom six forward that they'll take
sort of like
shot.
AJ Greer last year,
yeah,
like that kind of guy.
Yeah, I mean, but they do need to address this forward position, in some way, shape, or form. Yeah, I think the loss Cole, thank goodness for Costco and thank God Justin Kirkland stepped up. But I do think they missed Cole Schwint. I think that they would have liked him to be in some sort of the guy that you're kind of bringing up and down, but he's not there anymore. But I do think with the Mantha injury, I think that they're going to try to find somebody a veteran forward that they can fill that gap with. I think
if you're looking at the current roster to take a guy on the road with you, I think it's either Hunt or Ferk.
Yeah. And
I didn't think we'd see Ferk called up this year, but I think with the lack of other options, you might just take the veteran.
Yeah. And the power play being an unmitigated disaster, the guy
generally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean anyone else, like, I think the natural thing for a lot of people would say, oh, bring Peltier up. But again, he needs the development time, right? Bring Morton up. He needs development time. Bring Honzig up. They don't want them to sit on the bench. I think if you bring Ferk up, you know what Ferk is. He's not going to get better playing in the American League. You can do without him for a couple of games. I think same thing with Dryden Hunt. Like, I think if you're going to bring
even Klapka that they've brought up a couple of times, he's kind of is what he is. Like there is no like top 4, top 6 upside. Like,
I think his position on the Wranglers will be missed more.
True, but like if you're calling him up, like it's not going to stagnate his development.
No, it's not.
It's going to be for like Honzek or insert any of the other young forwards.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think they have to address the position. I mean, the other option is that Joel Hanley has yet to play. Has played one game this year?
I think 1 or 2.
Yeah,
you're going to get Matt excited here. If you try to convince them that Hanley should be a forward, you're going to get Matt all excited.
Well, hey, the Avalanche actually did play Shillington as a forward.
I was waiting for you to bring this up, Matt. Every year he wants to convert a defenseman to forward, and they finally did it. And I saw that on TV. I'm like, Matt's going to be excited right now.
Yes, exactly. So there you go.
I'm saying that they could trade Hanley for a 13th type of forward to fill that too, right? So
yeah, like there's no real rush, but if it ever becomes an issue, I think that Conroy just needs to hop on the phone for like 5 minutes and he could, easily facilitate something like that.
For sure. Well, our guest here, Kevin, has a couple hot takes he wants to go through. Should we jump into these, gentlemen? Let's start with your first one. Would Andrei Kuzmenko clear waivers? You got to tell me the thinking behind this, Kevin.
Okay, well, look, I mean, we've just had this discussion about whether Matt Coronado is staying in the lineup. One of the reasons that Matt Coronado is staying in the lineup is I don't think there's any argument. I mean, he's got 5 goals. Andrei Kuzmenko's 1 goal this year. 3 of the last 4 games, he hasn't even had a shot on goal. He was put to the pine couple games ago, at least. It's a couple of times he's been put to the pine. I mean, as well. I'm watching. I mean, I think he's been playing a little bit with Kadri, and I get, like, you look at the stats for Kadri, including the natural stat tricks, which, by the way, Kuzmenko on the ice is out shooting opponents, and Kadri is not, which some people are looking at. I think Kadri has been somewhat hindered by Kuzmenko. I don't see Kuzmenko going to the net. I don't see him really completely engaged in any way, shape, or form. Though, I'm not going to dispute the guy's talent. He's an unrestricted free agent. I don't necessarily think you're gonna. I don't think you're gonna get much for him in a trade.
I think how much you get is going to depend on how much you're willing to eat.
Yeah, pretty much.
And the Flames could easily eat half, which is the maximum you can eat.
Yeah, I wonder. I wonder at this point what you can do anymore with Kuzmenko.
Well, you just talked about how the Flames need forward bodies. I think in that case, putting Kuzmenko on waivers is not going to solve that problem.
No, I guess not. I think I've answered my own question, but
I mean, unless you think, say, Peltier is the answer.
And he's not. I'm not. There's no other. I'm not necessarily saying anybody on the wing is better. Though it down there is better than what they got in Kuzmenko. But this is, I mean, one goal from a guy that scored 9 a couple of years ago, and a guy that kind of sparked the power play in the back half of the season last year. I don't know.
But at the same time, that's why you acquired Kuzmenko, right? Because he wasn't the consistent fit Vancouver needed him to. That's why, let's be honest, that's why they gave him to Calgary as a cap dump. Calgary didn't go out wanting this player. They took him as a cap dump.
Yeah, and I've seen because I've been over the last handful of games, I've been specifically looking at Kuzmenko, and he and Kadri have zero chemistry together, and that I do believe is a major reason why Kuzmenko has struggled this year, because for whatever reason, they just do not work well together. And we saw last year, why he played so well was he was with Sharon Govich and Huberdeau for the back 20 games of the year. And I think that, much like what we were just discussing with Nashville, not having chemistry issue, and that being the main reason for the issues, I think that in a similar vein, Kuzmenko just not finding a fit with anybody thus far. And, he is trying out there, it's just that he's trying to do it all by himself because his line mates are not working well with him. And I've seen him try to dangle through people and take a shot, and it'll get blocked or the goalie will make a save. But it's hard when he is trying to do stuff. It's just that nothing is quite clicking right at the moment for him. And I think shaking him up with a different group of people, I think, would help.
Yeah, I'm with Matt. I think if he's not working with Kadri Possible, try him with Backlund Coleman, or try him with, Hubert Ozari, or try him on another pairing. I mean, last game they had Kevin Rooney playing on the wing, and Rooney's a centerman. I mean, put him on the fourth line with Lomberg Kirkland. I think that there's other places to put him, or staple him to the press box. But I don't know that waiving him solves your issues. I also think as a team that's rebuilding and trying to bring in the occasional vet like Mantha, you're all sending the wrong message to players.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
His results have been disappointing. I don't think anybody's going to argue with that.
No.
Yeah.
But at the same time, and if the Flames were destined for the playoffs, I'd be saying, yeah, let's do it. As a rebuilding team, I see no reason to do it.
Okay, fair enough. I understand where you're coming from.
Right? If this team was destined to go to the finals and Kuzmenko was a guy that was supposed to be getting them 30 points and he's not performing, sure, send him a message, put him on waivers, that sort of thing. But I think we all knew going into the season what the Flames are, and we all knew going into the season what Kuzmenko is. And I think we got excited looking at his 20 games as a Flame last year. But if we look at the time in Vancouver, and, this is what we should have expected from Kuzmenko.
Yeah, you're not getting when you trade Kuzmenko, and that's quite likely going to happen closer to the trade deadline. You're not getting anything for him. You'd
probably get a third or a fourth.
Yeah, I mean, they might do what Vancouver did with Daniel Sprong and trade him for, and I'm using air quotes here, future considerations.
You know, I think one thing we forget about Kuzmenko too is he's, I think, a guy that is really good in this room. Everybody likes him. They think he's funny, that sort of thing. So I think you want to keep that, even if he's sitting in the press box, I think you want to keep that presence in the room.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, and maybe when I see this, Kuzmenko will go on a little bit of a goal streak here and kind of pick things up, and who knows, right? But
yeah, like I think it's still early, and I think that like with a bunch of people, like we've just seen with the Zari and Pospisil getting shifted around, I think that you could see more shifting around of trying to get different options for players, and because similarly, Sharon Govich has not looked very good since he's returned from injury, and which is kind of to be expected. Like anytime somebody suffers a injury in training camp, that like usually the first half of the season is usually garbage for that player.
Yeah, and I'm more patient. I think Sharon Govich, I mean, he scored 30 goals last year. I think that there's something there. Mm-hmm. Just with Kuzmenko, it's just it's inconsistent. It's the inconsistent that I wonder if he would. I just toss that out there. It's like would he actually clear?
Probably at this point. Yeah, just because nobody can really afford the
$5 million. I think it'd be mostly because of the money that he'd clear waivers. And I think really, again, there's no harm to keeping him on the NHL roster, right? It's not like they're going anywhere with him. And in the offseason, I think that's really the determination of who wants him. Yeah. Maybe ends up going back to Russia, maybe doesn't. I think, to me, there's no harm in keeping him here. And if you send him to the Wranglers, I don't know how good he does there either.
Yeah, he might be a distraction at that point.
Well, that's it. Yeah. And who are you displacing to put him in the lineup?
That's true.
Right. Like I think you just, at this point, you keep him in the NHL, you eat his money because you can, and you move him for whatever you can get at the deadline. Even if that means you'll consider me or us in the future. Nothing says they have to consider us positively. Just they have to consider us.
Yeah. Just you future consider.
That's right. At some point, that GM will sit there and be like, Calgary. Okay, you've considered us. So
considered us. Thank you. Yeah.
So we've talked about having to solve this center problem. We have two possible options here. Let's start with Kevin's option, and then we'll talk about the one Matt and I have talked about. Kevin, you have a hot take. Do you want to tell us your hot take here on this?
Okay, like just I think before people laugh, I think people just need to hear me out.
I'm going to mute myself then.
Okay. I do think that if the Flames had their druthers, I think they would have liked to have grabbed a center in this draft. I don't have any inside knowledge, but I think that they were probably hoping that a guy like Caden Lidstrom would have fallen as far as they were. It didn't. They grabbed Zane Parekh. I am not saying that they should do it. I think that there's a lot of tremendous potential with Zane Parekh. There's lots to be excited for him. But it is really, that they want a centerman. I don't know if they have, other than one other piece, I don't know if they can get a top 6 forward other than drafting for it, which I think the only one that potentially could do that for you is Rasmus Andersson. So I'm just tossing it out there. If it was a similarly aged centerman as Zane Parekh with top 2 potential, would you consider doing it?
No.
You're saying trade Zane Parekh away for a centerman?
If it was and you don't have to do it this year.
Same potential, same age, same everything. Like say trading him for Lindstrom, as you mentioned. I still wouldn't.
I wouldn't either. I think that optically there's something about Zane Parekh if he's sort of the future hope, right? I mean, Matt and I were doing a live draft show when we saw him picked, and there was a lot of excitement in the room, even though people didn't know who he was, a lot of them, that this is the guy who's going to lead us out of this. I think this is Conroy's guy. How often do we see, GMs be loyal to their first couple picks? And I think Zane Parekh is a defenseman. I think you need defense just as much you need forwards. I think there will be more chances for Calgary to try and grab a center in a draft than there will be to to grab what could potentially be a franchise defenseman.
Yeah,
Fair
and
enough.
it's one of those where defensemen also take a lot longer to develop, and the Flames are basically in year one of the retool slash rebuild. So like usually like if you're talking like really high end centers in the draft anyway, most of them are kind of plug and play. Like when the Flames drafted Sean Monahan, like there wasn't really much of a learning curve for him. He just played and was a top scorer for his entire time in Calgary until the end. And defensemen though, like it usually takes 3, 4, 5 seasons post draft for them to emerge as like the top tier guy. Somewhat like Anderson, where it took him until he was like 24 to be a top pairing caliber guy, and like Perek, we saw in the preseason was quite horrible defensively. And like he's the offensive game's there, but he's got a long way to go still. And I think just based on timelines, you kind of just have to be patient and utilize a lot of your focus over the next few drafts and in subsequent trades, much like they did last year with addressing defensemen in trades and at the draft table. Just draft center, 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 and go from there.
I think there will be other chances to get a defenseman. And even if I look back at other drafts, I think a lot of times the high end defenseman, unless a generational guy, a Bedard, or maybe, coming up Gavin McKenna, I don't know that you're always getting what you want out of that guy. Like, I think there will be more chance to try and grab that guy, whether through draft, whether through trade, or whether through free agency.
Yeah. I mean, it's they have the salary to do it. I mean, they're going to have to ultimately they are going to have to draft and develop it. But I do think that this is, I don't know if I want to say it's a sense of urgency with the position, but I think that I think we can agree that it's an absolute need to address the center position. And that's why I'm not saying you should trade Zane Parekh, but
they need to address it, Kevin, but I don't know they need to address it now, and I don't know they need to bring in a young guy for it. Like, with the assets they have and the cap room they have, you can probably find a top 9 center without a lot of issues, even if you're willing to take on a 32-year-old overpaid one from someone else to fill the spot. But going back to what we talked about earlier with Kuzmenko, do they need that solution now? I don't feel you do. I think the Flames have a couple of years to find that emerging first-line center.
I mean, I think that you can. I mean, maybe that's the other way to look at my Parekh proposal is that you're not doing this today, but maybe if something comes down the road, I don't know. But like the guys that are available now that I think are in that age group, I just think make too much. And I know the Flames have cap room, but wouldn't be comfortable taking on a Dylan Cousins with that salary or a Robert Thomas with that salary right now. I do think you have to draft them.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to take on anybody with a long-term deal, but even if you do like a Kuzmenko, right, a 1-year or 2-year contract that you're taking on just to move it off from another team, I think that's what you'll see the Flames go with at some point.
Yeah, and realistically, like the Flames still have a number of trade pieces, and like a guy like Nazem Kadri to a contending team does make a lot of sense, where you could get, draft capital, whether it's a freshly drafted center or, utilizing draft picks for centers. Like there are, many different ways of addressing it. It's one of those that like we just kind of have to be patient, and like you look a year ago and like the winger and defenseman laundry list of Flames prospects was looking rather bare, and now like those are like so well stocked that like the Flames can kind of not focus on.
They got the goalies, they got the defense, they got good enough wingers.
Yeah, like it's kind of like, for the next little bit, it'll be center, 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 and some more centers.
Yeah, and, we talked earlier about, do you bring Mantha back in the offseason? Like, I think if they're going to bring in another veteran, you're bringing in a centerman. I think right now, you can find that top nine centerman, not the guy that's necessarily going to lead you, for 10 years as your generational first line center, but I think is a better than what you've got middle option. I think they can easily find that. And if they really feel they need to, move a player out, I think as much I don't think it happens this year, I think Rasmus Anderson is the asset you give up if you want to get that really good centerman.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and like Matt said, if the Flames are willing to eat half of Kadri's deal for the remainder of it, I think that's an asset you can move. Like I think they've got the pieces they need to get a good enough centerman.
Yeah. And it's one of those where you can kind of layer it too, where like having say Kadri and Backlund in the lineup, it kind of puts like the pause button on needing to and like you can keep drafting centers for like the next 3 drafts and just let whomever actually takes the spot. And having a deep prospect pool also helps. So, like once this team goes into contender mode, you can, package 2 or 3 or 4 different assets to get that, like when Jack Eichel came available, like insert that kind of guy here. But it's just one of those that, we're talking about like stage C and D of the rebuild, and we're still in the A phase.
Let me throw out another possible asset here. Dustin Wolf looking like an NHL goaltender. I think we'd all say that. If you're looking for an asset to move, I think there's a number of NHL teams right now that are looking for a goaltender. I think if you want to chase that young centerman, the asset to offer up might be Dan Vladar. I think you could make a case that, with the way the Wranglers are looking, if you run a Wolf as your number 1 and Cooley as your number 2, you're still going to have serviceable goaltending this year, and that sacrifice might be worth it to go out and get yourself that centerman for a guy who's on an expiring deal anyways. I mean, that's the last year of the Vladar contract, and I think we know now who the number 1 is. Matt, what do you think of that?
Yeah, and I don't think that you would get like anybody with like a top 6 upside in terms of the center, but you might be able to get somebody along the lines of like a Backlund type replacement, or just a draft pick to then use for that type of guy.
What do you think, Kevin?
Well, I think the first thing here is I have 2 thoughts on this. Devin Cooley has only played 6 games in the National Hockey League, and I know he's playing well in the AHL. I still would like to see more NHL games from him to see that he would be the number 2. And I mean, he's got a good sense of humor, but I'm one that thinks that the Flames should actually consider re-signing Vladar. I'm not saying that Dustin Wolf's not an NHL goalie, but I think that Dan Vladar, I don't think Vladar is getting enough credit in this market for what
I think Vladar's looking great.
No, and he's looking like an above average starting goaltender in the league.
Yeah, he's getting more of the criticism than Wolf when they get off to the slow start. But there's been times when the Flames were down 2-0. He hasn't allowed that third goal to allow him to get back in the game.
But it's the old toy versus the new toy, right? We all like the new toy, and Wolf is a new toy. Vladar's been here for a couple of years, so I think fans are enamored by the new toy.
Yeah,
but I'm a little hesitant in giving up Vladar just because goalie health. I mean, you see this here in Vancouver with Thatcher Demko. You're seeing this in Carolina, where they're not only losing Kochetkov, they've lost Frederik Andersen. They're down to their number 3. There's a number of situations where goalies, I think the depth in this thing, and I guess we'll get to the other part of this question here in a second. I'm a little hesitant to trade Vladar. I think that you should, I would consider not re-signing him long term, but another 1 or 2 year deal wouldn't hurt to have him around.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying the Flames shouldn't sign him or he's not looking great. I think really the strength of the Flames here has been their tandem, not just Wolf. But if you're looking for a piece to move, he seems like he could be the logical piece.
And I do think that there would be teams that would be interested in him for sure. And I mean, top of my head, I think Philadelphia, Detroit.
I think Toronto needs a goalie.
No, I think Toronto. I was going to say Montreal, actually, more Montreal than Toronto. I think Stolarz and Wool, I think that they're confident with them.
LA, I think, could use a goalie.
Definitely at least a backup goalie for sure. No offense to former Flame David Riddick, but I mean, that could be an option. Minnesota is not going to have Marc-Andre Fleury next year. There are going to be teams that will ask. I just don't know if I'm necessarily comfortable with what's behind Vladar being that number 2.
I think for the rest of this season, like Vladar's deal's up, and we don't know if Vladar wants to sign as a backup, right, or as a number 2, which I think is where it's going to go. If Vladar makes it known he doesn't want to stay here in Calgary, you've got to move him. You can't let this guy walk for nothing because there is an asset there. I could see him.
And I think that also because of the fact that Cooley is signed to a one-way deal next year where he'll get paid NHL dollars. I think that the writing's kind of on the wall already that Cooley is going to be the backup.
And after this year in the AHL, I think it's going to be hard to sneak Cooley through waivers again.
No.
Yeah, sure.
So, and Kevin, I think the question becomes again, looking at where this team is, right? Looking at the fact they're rebuilding. Okay, so if you move Vladar, yes, maybe Cooley we're not comfortable with, but could you find a Vladar equivalent in the offseason if you're not?
Maybe.
And it's one of those that like you also don't know exactly what you have in Cooley. Like he's changed his style and in the last little bit, and that's part of the reason why he's doing so well both in the preseason and in the A to start this year. And you also need to kind of get a book on him at the NHL level to know if he's actually good enough to be a backup.
If you've got 2 NHL
level.
goalies, you're not gonna get a book on your other guy in the NHL, right?
So I don't think that like a trade with Vladar would happen anytime soon. It would probably be a trade deadline type deal.
Or I can see there being the team who their starter goes out, they're desperate. This is kind of what I'm thinking is the team, and it happens every year, right? Somebody loses their starter.
Carolina.
Yeah, they don't have faith in their backup. They come to Calgary and say, we're willing to overpay because we need a goaltender we know can do it. And I think you've got to be willing to. I just think the Vladar has to be in that conversation of a piece. If you're looking for a centerman, I'm not saying they do it today, but I think it's definitely a piece they need to look at. Of who do you move, and you're gonna have to take a goalie back, right? I mean, they've got Ignatieff in the AHL. I don't know that Ignatieff can keep the 12-3 record going. You're gonna need to take a 3-4 goalie back, so it puts another guy in the system. And again, who knows what that guy will be. But I think it's a piece that isn't being talked about as a movable asset.
Yeah, I guess the question, like, as we go through, I mean, I think we're all expecting the Flames to fade at some point.
I think they already are over the last 10 games or so.
Yeah, right. It's true. So, I mean, I guess if they're in that wild card position by Christmas, what I guess that's the question of what they're going to do. What will they do?
And as much as we're all saying we don't have, faith in Cooley because we haven't seen him, at the same time, do you need to? Like, do you give him the year to say, show us what you got, kid, and then make, appropriate changes after that?
Well, if you believe that Devin Cooley is your backup, then you don't necessarily need to bring in another goalie to play an NHL goalie. You can develop a guy like Ignatieff, or you can draft another goalie, which you should be doing every year.
Anyway. Or sign like Oscar Dansk, the new version of just the quality AHL veteran guy, and have him as the 3-4 guy with Ignatieff.
But I guess that's kind of what I'm saying is if you think Cooley could be your backup, at what point do you give him that chance?
Well, I would think that at some point during this fade, when they fade here, you got to, before the trade deadline, I'm assuming that you're going to call up Devin Cooley and try to see if he plays in the NHL.
Yeah.
Do you give him, like, you're going to have to do this at some point.
So Wolf is not waiver eligible. Do you send Wolf down to play for the Wranglers at that point?
No, I think that you would just ride 3 if you're thinking of doing that.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a bit of A and a bit of B. I think they definitely need to call Cooley up at some point. I think, like we talked about earlier, though, they don't want to disturb the chemistry of the Wranglers. So they're going to have to wait for the Wranglers to fade before they take away their starter on a 12-3 start. And I think that there are going to be hard decisions. I mean, if I'm Dan Vladar, I'm not sure I'd want to re-sign in this scenario.
No. Like
So
realistically, like with Wolf looking like he is going to be the heir apparent and like the starter moving forward, it makes no sense for him when he is good enough to be an NHL starter. Like it's not like
Yeah.
he's playing like a
yeah.
backup.
So that's kind of what I mean is capitalize on the asset. Like, if Wolf makes it known, or sorry, if Vladar makes it known, guys, I don't want to come back next year, flip them, see what you got in Cooley, and then make a decision in the offseason. Is it Cooley? Is it somebody else? Like, I think you got to capitalize on the asset at some point. And if I'm Vladar, I wouldn't be coming back. Or at least I'd be listening to other offers first.
Yeah, I kind of understand why I wouldn't when I come back to Vladar, but at the same time, I'm also concerned that you can turn a legitimate strength into a legitimate question mark if Vladar leaves and heaven forbid something happens to Dustin Wolf and you're scrambling again, right?
Yeah,
So
well, and that's
But Kevin,
where
you talked about want to draft a top center. If he leaves and something happens to Wolf, now you're drafting your top center.
yeah,
Like,
exactly.
I mean, to me, this is the year to do it and experiment, because if the team falls flat on their face, that's okay.
yeah, I see where you're coming from, but I just there's a part of me that's you're making a lot of really good points that I want to see more from Devin Cooley before I'm necessarily and I don't know what you would get for Vladar overall. I would have to think about it a little
Probably
bit
a
more.
second round pick, give or take.
Yeah, if that's
Yeah,
that,
Mm-hmm.
just ballparking it. You might get slightly more if teams are desperate, but
Again, I think it depends. Yeah, when you move them, but I think you've got to be open to the possibility. And I'm not saying, he's terrible, banish him from town or anything, but I think it has to be a discussion that Craig Connor and his team have to be having, just like we are, of this is an asset that could net us something.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
it's tough because like he's good. It's just we're in this weird situation
Yeah.
where we have three good goalies and
And
yeah,
yes, he's good. And I guess that's why I bring it up too. Like, the old saying, you've got to give to get, right? Is you can't just move your trash hoping for somebody else's, treasures. At some point, if you want to make a move, you have to move something good to get that thing you want.
yep, that's true. No, that is true.
Right. I mean,
And
I think the Flames lucked
overall,
out a lot last year with some of the pieces they got back for their expiring contracts, but I don't think that's going to be the norm. I don't think you're going to move, Kuzmenko for the next Hunter Brstavich or something like that. Like, I think if the Flames are serious about getting some upgrades, they're going to have to look at giving something of value.
yeah, this trade deadline, the way I see it, the only other than maybe the only reasonable thing that I think that you'll get a significant asset for is Rasmus Anderson. I'm not entirely sure. Like, it depends on what you eat for Kadri, but I think that's an off-season move.
Yeah, I think so too.
think,
And I personally don't think that Anderson moves this year.
I could see it depending on where the team is. Like if they're in, say like they're in the bottom 8 or so, I could see the team just like, well, let's get worse because like at that point, like Anderson's not going to necessarily want to re-sign long term with the team anyway. And if you get the right assets, because like he would be the best player available at the at the deadline, and defensemen always go for 4 arms and 3 legs, like we saw last year with like what we got for Hannafin.
There's always defensemen that go for a lot, and there's always a goalie or two that goes for a lot.
Yes.
Yeah, the one thing that I wonder about is if Rasmus Anderson represents Team Sweden on the Four Nations, which I do think is
I would guarantee he would be.
Yeah, because they don't have a lot of right shot D.
No, they have 3 guys, and he's by far the best of the 3. So
yeah, and if he has a good tournament, I think some general managers might look and consider that more of an option for this year. But I'm 50-50. I'm 50. It could be trade deadline, could be the off season. It depends where teams are at.
yeah, and his contract at like $4 million, like literally every team can afford that at the deadline.
I mean, and if you want me, if I'm Conroy and you say, what, you can't afford, you want me to eat half of it? Sure. I'm happy to do it. It's going to cost you, but I'm happy to do it if you can't afford it.
Yeah.
But yeah, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying Vladar is bad or they should move him because he's not looking good. I think the reason I'm bringing it up is because he is looking good. And when I look around the league, if you need a goalie, I don't see many other teams that are going to have a goalie to part with at this point. Like I think
and especially like all the teams that are outside the playoffs, most of their goaltenders are way worse than what
that's
Vladar
why they're
is.
outside the playoffs.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm at. Is I think Calgary has, like we said, they've got a good 3, maybe a good 4. They've got at least one goalie who could be turning pro in the offseason. I think sometimes you have to deal from a position of strength. And if I'm the Flames, I think have to be exploring this. If you know what, deal from the position of strength. I mean, for all we know, Vladar becomes a free agent in the offseason and you bring him back,
Yeah.
we're not sending him somewhere with a 5-year deal, right? If he really wants to come back, bring him back. But I think at some point you've got to look at that as a position of strength we can deal from.
Yeah, I mean, and your other argument is you have to at some point consider what you're going to pay Dustin Wolf long term.
Well, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, and like realistically, like if he keeps up playing like a top 10 goalie in the NHL, he's going to get $7+ million a year, and you're not going to be wanting to spend $3 or $4 million on a Vladar anyway at that point.
And again, if the Flames are going to do this, now's the time to do it, right? Like now's the time to go with a bit of a goaltending weakness at backup to find that guy, because I'd rather they do it now than they do it 4 years from now when we're back in a Kipper situation where every year you're bringing in a subpar backup, because again, you can't afford them or your guy's good enough. Like now's the time to do that experiment.
Yeah,
Fair.
and additionally, you also, like, if you move Vladar, you have this offseason to evaluate Cooley and see, like, do you need to get a legit, like, a James Reimer
that's
type
what I was
backup
saying.
for
That's what I was
next
saying
year?
earlier, Matt. Is if you don't think Cooley can cut it after you give him the chance, you can always go in the offseason and change your direction.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You could bring in a Reimer. You could bring in another, guy who needs a shot somewhere, like Vladar was in Boston, or I think there will be options to hit Control Z in the offseason.
Yep, for sure. I see your point.
Yeah, and I think that's what we have to remember sometimes as fans and as pundits is you can't just deal your crap. You've got to deal from a position of strength if you want to get stuff back.
But the goaltending position has changed where I'm not convinced going forward we're going to be seeing goalies play 55 to 60. I think we'll see 50 to 55, but I'm not convinced we're seeing 55 to 60 going forward.
I agree with you, and I don't know either way if Cooley's able to do 20 or 30. I don't know.
And the Flames don't, and nobody else does until
and
he
honestly,
actually gets
when Boston dealt Vladar, they didn't know if he would either. When the Flames brought Vladar in, I don't think they knew either. You don't know till you give the guy a shot.
Yeah, and like Boston at the time, like they had Ullmark and Swayman, which I would easily take both of those guys over Vladar anyway.
But even Vladar's first couple seasons here, he had strokes where he looked really good, and then he had periods where it's like, wow, this guy's not looking like a good backup. So we didn't know until we gave him some runway.
Yeah. And there are always teams that have multiple, up and coming goalies that, you can always snag one. So there's lots of flexibility.
For sure.
Talking about Vladar, let's wrap up with this story. Talking about Vladar's partner in the crease, Dustin Wolf, in his rookie year, looking fantastic. What do we think the chance is that he's in the top 3 for the Calder Cup at the end of the year? The Calder Trophy. For those that don't know, the Calder Trophy is the trophy awarded to the Rookie of the Year, as voted by the Professional Hockey Writers Association. Let's go to Kevin with his thoughts.
Oh, this is a stacked group.
Last goalie to win it was Steve Mason in 08-09. Who?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. I mean, I think that Matvei Michkov is going to get some sympathy votes because he got benched by Tortorella. And I think the way he's playing, I think he's probably the odds on. I think Logan Stankoven is going to be in that race. Siplikov, you'll see this week with the Islanders. I think he's in that conversation. Jackson Blake, Will Smith. It's a really stacked lineup. I think he might get nominated, but I don't think he's going to win Rookie of the Year. Should he be in the conversation? Absolutely. Does he win it? I don't think so.
So you got to play 25 goals or 25 games to not be a rookie. Do you just get him to play 24 and then stop and get him back in the conversation next year?
That includes games last year. So
okay.
For me, I think that I'm gonna go on a limb and say that Dustin Wolf wins the Calder Trophy this year.
Wow.
Because I think that the Flames will actually be a little bit better than they should be and be in kind of a quasi playoff hunt for most of the year. And I think that will be due to the stellar play of Wolf. And I think he'll kind of drag this team upward from where they probably should be. And especially as the season goes on, I think he'll get more of the starts. And his stellar play, I think, will carry the day, and I think he'll start, like especially as the season drags on, and like Calgary is still kind of there. I think that media people will start to say, "Hey, why is this team that should be a bottom 5 team? Why are they still there?" And we'll tune in and say, "Oh, that's why," because. You look at the stats, like he's in the top 10 for goals against average and in the top 5 for save percentage of all goaltenders in the league. And, in my opinion, he has been the best goalie in the NHL this year.
I see where you're both coming. Oh, go ahead, Kevin.
I just forgot to put a couple of other names to put in this is Lane Hutson in Montreal is in this. Justice Annunen in Colorado will be in this. It's just there's so many that it's a stacked race. But go ahead.
Yeah, how would you say? I don't feel like there's a Bedard type guy. I think that like the secondary, like the guys who would normally finish second or third or fourth in the Calder. I think that like that's basically the group this year where there's just a bunch of guys that fit in that range. And I just feel that Wolf is just slightly better than all of that type of tier. Like I don't think there's anybody who's going to run away with it. I just feel that because Wolf's doing something different than everybody else, that he'll separate from the group because of that.
But the other, I mean, Macklin Celebrini has been hurt for most of the year, so I don't think he ends up in the top 3. But I do think that there'll be a lot of people considering him as well. Anyway, go ahead, Dan.
I think that because of what Kevin said and all the names Kevin's given, I think you're going to see the votes split a lot of ways. I think that Wolf might be the one guy that you get the more it's not like he's going to run away with this potentially, but I think he might get the most votes simply for being the goalie of the group and what a good story it is. And I think if you're in some of these markets, you'll vote for your local guy. If you're not, I think it's, he's the best story. Wolf is the best story for helping his team and coming in, doing what he's supposed to do. He's a 7th round pick. There's a story behind that as well. Like, I think that this could be one of those times, sort of like the election that we just saw in the States where, one guy barely wins because everybody voted. And I think you could see 6 or 7 guys get tie votes and the goalie goes up because of it. But I think that I think it's more evident to a lot of people how good the goalie does than the defensemen or the forwards or the wingers, unless they're scoring every night. So I think it'll be easy to see, okay, this guy's in our market. They came in for one night because we're in the East. We saw what he did. We want to vote for him. I don't know if I'm just rambling there or if you guys are understanding what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of understand. I do understand what you're saying, but Mitch Koff scores highlight reel goals too, right? So that's the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, he does, but I think at the same time, there's always a highlight reel guy every year that's coming up, right? If you don't put Mitchkov in this year, it's not like his career is going to be over. It's not like he was a great guy for 1 year, and I don't think that he's gonna. I almost wish that part of the calculus for this was sort of like the playoff MVP, where you had to look at your usefulness to that team. Yeah, Mitchkov's looking great. I don't think he's really going to elevate Philadelphia all that much. Like Matt said, I think if you look at Calgary, they're going to be in the hunt or not, I think, because of Wolf.
Yeah. I mean, he should be in the conversation. I do agree with that. He should be in the conversation.
Yeah. I think it just largely depends on where Calgary finishes. Like, if they do finish near, like, the bottom 5, I don't think that Wolf wins the Calder. But if they're anywhere, like, remotely close to a playoff spot, I think that it's hard to argue, like basically everybody said like Calgary was more or less going to be, San Jose light this year, where like, bottom 4, bottom 5.
San Jose Light means you get less points in San Jose or more points?
More.
Okay.
Like not quite that terrible, but close.
So that's like San Jose heavy then if you weigh more, but
Sure.
yeah. And I think too, going back to our previous conversation about Vladar, I think if these guys keep playing every other game, some of the writers in the East aren't maybe going to get the chance to see Vladar or see Wolf because they're just going to see Vladar instead. But I think if Wolf is given the starter role and you can see him run, and there's still a thing I want to see, like how does he do if we give him 5 games, 6 games, 7 games in a row? That's still what I want to see out of him. And I think if the Flames give him that number 1, if you will, that's really going to, I think, be where teams will go, okay, we've seen him and we saw him in our market and we know what he is. That's still my question mark about Wolf is how does he handle full-time work?
Yeah, because he hasn't played more than 2 games in a row. I mean,
all year,
yeah. I'm assuming he's going to get the Islanders start, but well, who knows?
Right, but I think that is, if I was looking at why would you not vote for him, that would be, I guess, my question mark there. Is like you said, Mitchkov and some of these guys, we're seeing them play a regular rotation. We're not seeing that for what we think of as a traditional starter. We're not seeing that from Wolf.
Not yet, no.
So it's still early in the season, but we'll see what happens there. Kevin, you mentioned the Islanders game. Should we jump to our predictions, gentlemen, or is there anything else we need to talk about?
Good to go.
No.
So last week we made our predictions. I finally beat Matt. Matt, you're up 2-1 now this season. I thought that the Flames would beat Nashville and LA and lose to Vancouver. You thought they'd beat Nashville, lose to LA and Vancouver. So I'm catching up on you slowly.
About time.
This week, the Flames have 3 games at home, so finally back in their own bed after that long, as we talked about, 5 games in 8 days. And also, weirdly, I think the only time there's been a weekend I can ever remember with no Flames hockey. They played Friday and they don't play again until Tuesday. Like, I know hockey parents of 8-year-olds that don't have that luxury, so that's kind of weird for the Flames. But 3 games here coming up. We've got a 7 o'clock start on Tuesday. The Islanders are in town. Then Thursday, a 7 o'clock start. The Rangers are in town. And then Saturday, Hockey Night in Canada, a 2 p.m. start with the Minnesota Wild. So, Matt, why don't you give us your predictions first, and I'll go to Kevin, and then I'll give you mine.
I think that they will beat the Islanders, and I think they will lose to both the Rangers and the Wild.
Why is that?
Minnesota's doing really well this year, and it's an afternoon game, so I think
the afternoon game seems to be their curse, doesn't it?
Yes, and the Rangers are just one of the best teams in the NHL, and I think that, unless it's a game like LA where the entire team is pulling in the same direction, I think that they'll struggle to score on Shesterkin. And the Islanders are not very good, so I feel that they should be able to beat them.
Kevin, what do you think?
I think I'll go backwards. I think they lose to Minnesota. I think they beat the Rangers. I think that's going to be an interesting goaltending matchup with Shesterkin and whoever. I think they beat the Islanders, but the Islanders are a hard-working team. I mean, so I think that one's going to be a bit more of a. I think Calgary goes 2-1. They beat the Islanders. They beat the Rangers. They lose to Minnesota.
I think Calgary can be a hardworking team, and I think that Islanders game is really going to make them show how badly they want it.
Yeah. They're that is a if you think 80, there should be an over under if there will be more than 80 whistles a game on that.
That was crazy. Like. I heard it from Beasley that 80 whistles was the official count. I think that's nuts.
Yeah, normally it's like around 50 or so, right?
I don't have the numbers in front of me. I'd say that would be on a high game.
Yeah, because
and we're not counting whistles for like commercial breaks and stuff like that.
Yeah, the 80 does seem excessive.
It does, yeah. I'm gonna go. Same as Kevin. I'd already locked these in before the show, so I think they're going to beat both New York teams. I think they're going to lose to Minnesota. I think the Islanders don't look good. I think the Flames, after having some rest and being at home, are going to be able to capitalize on that if they play their game and play 60 minutes, which is what Huska's been talking about for last week or so, is they need to come out and start early, or start on time, and finish on time. And I think if they can do that, they'll beat the Islanders. I think with the Rangers in town, I can almost see the Flames playing Wolf in the Rangers game to get the goalie matchup. And I think that the Rangers are going to be playing hard. I think the Flames hopefully can elevate themselves. We've seen themselves do to win. I think they're going to lose to Minnesota. I think Minnesota by that point is going to be the hungrier team. And as Matt said, the matinee factor, we always have to factor in for the Flames as well. So, yeah, I think...
So are you saying it goes Vladar, Wolf, Vladar for the Islanders, Wolf for the Rangers?
I think right now it'll probably be... See, I'm mixed. I think after the shutout, you want to put Wolf back in. But I think it'd be interesting to see him in the Rangers game. So... I look at this.
I'm hoping that they actually go Wolf, like 3 in a row, and give them some actual challenging competition, and then put Vladar in against the Wild.
Yeah, or I mean, you could even do Wolf all week and put Vladar in on the road against Ottawa.
Yeah, that's possible too.
Yeah, I don't know. I want to see. I think somebody needs to start getting some starts and stringing some starts together, and this would be the week to do it. My gut says, like Matt, this is the time to give Wolf a bit of a runway on this, being at home. But I think that Huska's probably going to go. I think he'll go Wolf, Vladar, Wolf again. But I would probably go Wolf, Vladar. What would you do, Kevin?
I would give Wolf the Islanders, and I'm going to wait and see what happens before they put him against who they play against the Rangers. If Wolf plays well, I would 60% consider playing him against the Rangers. If not, then you can go to Vladar.
As children, we played Duck, Duck, Goose. As adults and Flames fans, we now play Wolf, Vladar.
Wolf, Vladar, yes.
When it's Vladar's turn, you got to get up and run around and see who can dive into the net first.
Yeah. By the way, just so everyone knows, it's averages 69 whistles a game.
There you go. Game. So Matt was low, 80 is still high. That's a lot more whistles than I would have thought of. So Kevin, thanks for joining us this week. Do you want to let people know where they can hear more of your Flames insights?
Yes. So we talk Flames, we talk Canucks, we talk other NHL as well. So we do once a week. We try to do once a week with the Canucks, once a week with the Flames. Tough with my schedule. Sometimes it has to be on the weekends because I navigate traffic on the ones at night. So
not just a hobby. This is your job.
Just my job. Yeah.
You don't just get out and drive only on the ones to navigate the traffic.
No. Yeah. It's my job. You can find us on wherever you get your podcasts, facebook.com, Shifts and Pucks, youtube.com, Shifts and Pucks, twitch.com, Shifts and Pucks. We are also on Blue Sky now. You can follow me on Threads, Blue Sky, on all social media at KEBOLE.
And as always, Matt and I will be back next week to talk more Flames hockey. We'll see how they do against these New York teams and how they're positioning themselves for the road trip.
And as always, go Flames, go.
Fireside Chat is hosted by Dan Stevenson, co-hosted by Matt DeBorg. This episode produced and edited by Peter Marino. Fireside Chat is licensed under Creative Commons license. For full license details, visit firesidechat.ca.